Have you ever found yourself on a very loosely organized ride? I'm not talking about one of the big organized benefit rides or anything like that. I'm just talking about when we get together with a group of friends and every single stop we make, it somehow turns into this monumental discussion about the next stop, how we're going to get there, where we're going to eat. That's the important one. But it always happens. Now, it's not in a combative or a tense way. It's just that we simply enjoy being out on the ride, and all other matters seem to be secondary to just being in the saddle with the wind in our hair. Yet, when these discussions arise, there will always be that one whose will is the strongest, and that is the one who ends up making the decision for the group. And everyone else just falls into agreement and goes along. Nobody's hurt, nobody's upset. But that is until you get to the next stop, and then guess what? That discussion begins again. There isn't just one single leader in this ride. There's multiple intermittent leaders. Now, for many of us, we approach our faith in the exact same manner. We subject ourselves to the thoughts and ideas of others as we navigate this road of salvation and sanctification. Looking back, how many times have you been led astray by some well-intentioned or well-meaning friend? Now, don't feel bad. We're all influenced by the world around us. We allow others to sometimes shape our theological views without first considering what God has to say about the matter. We must subject ourselves to God's will and His perfect plan. It is hard, I know, to remove ourselves from the equation and put every ounce of trust in God. But that's the only way that we can be truly obedient to His will for our lives. I think about these words in Proverbs. Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand. How many times have you found yourself with what you felt was a foolproof plan for your life? Or maybe just some moment in your life. When the plan's executed, you just know that you will be the happiest that you have ever been. But things come along that don't fit the plan, and you stubbornly reject the change, or worse still, you absolutely just give up on the plan completely. Those unexpected changes could have been due to your own poor planning, or it could have been God trying to guide you in the direction that He wanted you to go, so that you would fall under His will for your life, rather than allowing you to travel down a road that He already knows what waits at the end. Sometimes God will gently alter the course. Other times, He will smack you with a 2x4. If you aren't obedient, then it doesn't really matter, because you have no way of discerning God's will from your own will. Jesus very plainly tells us that if we are obedient, we will recognize His voice and His will in our lives. To Him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear His voice, and He calls His own sheep by name and leads them out. When He has brought out all His own, He goes before them, and the sheep follow Him, for they know His voice. We often go to God in prayer, and we view that special moment as our opportunity to throw a wish list up to heaven and beg God to bend His will to our desires. Do you see the problem in that? Do you see any aspect of your own prayer life in that simple idea? Now, don't get me wrong, it is perfectly acceptable to go before God and tell Him the desires of your heart, but it is not okay to go before God and view Him as some cosmic genie. When we present God with the desires of our heart, we must be willing to let God's will be done in every single case. When our will aligns with God's will, that is the moment where we will experience the purest joy that we have ever known. So what is the answer to being obedient to God's will? Well, it's really quite simple. We listen. Jesus tells us in the previous verse that we just looked at that we will know His voice. Does this mean that you're going to like God's will? No, probably not, at least not in that moment, because your human desires may not get fulfilled in the way that you want. But on down the road, when you will look back, you will see that God truly did do what is best for you and for His glory. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. When we practice obedience, it becomes more natural, and it becomes an inherent part of who we are. but it takes time and it takes effort. We strive towards that goal of taking every thought captive to obey Christ. This requires discipline and prayer. Actually, a lot of discipline and an even more prayer, if we're going to be honest with ourselves. We must pray for obedience. We must pray for God's will to be done. It's absolutely vital. Jesus even teaches us this in the Lord's Prayer. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Ask yourself this question. Have you completely surrendered to God's will for your life? Be careful not to fool yourself by saying that you do want God's will for your life, but then you immediately go along and do exactly as you please. That is a false submission to God, and it only hinders your relationship with Him. Also, you must be aware that God's will sometimes will be costly. It will require sacrifice on occasion. We cannot only be submissive to God's will when it doesn't cost us anything. God's will is perfect, and it will prevail regardless of what we do. Try standing in front of a speeding train that has no brakes and stop that train with your bare hands. Now, truthfully, that is actually more probable than any of us actually altering God's will to align with our own. If you want to experience true joy, true peace, and take a step forward in your sanctification, listen to God. Pray to God and seek His will for your life. You will not regret it, I promise you. Rejoice always. Pray without ceasing. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you.